The twin suns burned hot above the cracked stone of the arena, where thousands of HFY citizens screamed for blood. The noise echoed through the massive Colosseum, built of black steel and bone-colored rock. In the center, a human knelt with his hands chained behind him, sweat running down his face, dirt clinging to his torn uniform. His name was Jace Calder, a reconnaissance scout from Earth, captured after his ship crash-landed on the Queen's territory. Now, he was just a prisoner, dragged into a spectacle meant to humiliate him before the Empire. On the high platform above, Queen Virilia stood tall in her shimmering battle gown, her violet skin glowing in the heat, silver crown glinting under the sun. Her eyes were cold as she raised a hand, silencing the crowd with one sharp gesture. "Let the lesson begin," she said, voice hard as ice. "Show the galaxy what happens when weak species defy the Shari." From the opposite gate, a warrior emerged 7 feet tall, armored in dark scales, carrying a curved blade pulsing with energy. She was Virelia's best fighter, a champion who had never lost. The crowd erupted, thirsty for violence. Jace slowly rose to his feet. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing but his reflexes and training. He watched her approach, studied her stance, the way her right leg slightly dragged, an old injury, maybe. She swung the blade wide in a showy motion, trying to frighten him. But Jace didn't move. He waited. The first strike came fast. The blade sliced through the air toward his side, but he spun under it, letting the blow miss by inches. He kicked her knee as he passed, forcing her to stumble. The crowd gasped. The warrior turned, now serious. The next attacks were quicker, angrier. Jace dodged, rolled, and used his surroundings, the pillars, the loose sand, the slope of the ground. He didn't fight with brute strength, but with speed, with focus. On Earth, he had trained in neural reactive combat, taught to read movement before it happened. The alien warrior didn't expect a human to last this long. She shouted, in her own tongue, charging at him with full force. But Jace dropped to one knee and swept her legs out from under her. She hit the ground hard, her blade skidding across the sand. He was on her in seconds, pinning her arm behind her back. She struggled, snarled, but she was trapped. The silence in the arena was total. No one moved. Queen Virelia's eyes widened as she slowly stood from her throne. Her champion had been defeated in front of the entire empire. The rules of UA law were ancient and unbreakable. A public challenger who wins cannot be punished. And if the challenge was given in the name of the queen, the winner must be honored or wed. Virelia's face turned to stone. She descended the steps with a rigid grace, her guards uncertain whether to follow. Jace stood as she approached, still breathing hard, body aching. Blood stained his side, but he kept his back straight. She stopped only inches away, eyes locked with his. "You were meant to fall," she said quietly. "You were meant to be broken." Jace didn't answer. His silence was louder than words. Around them, the crowd watched, holding its breath. "Then by law," she said, voice trembling with fury, "you shall not be executed." She turned to her people. "This human, by right of the challenge, will become my consort." Shock swept the Colosseum. Some shouted in anger. Others laughed in disbelief. Jace blinked, not sure he had heard right. Virilia didn't look at him again. She simply walked away, her back straight, her jaw tight. Guards stepped forward to escort Jace from the arena, not as a prisoner, but as the Queen's chosen. As he limped behind them, heart pounding, one question echoed in his mind. What the hell had he just become? And what would happen next? Asterisk. The doors slammed shut behind Jace with a deep metallic thud, sealing him inside a chamber that looked more like a shrine than a room. The floor was polished black stone, glowing faintly beneath his bare feet. Strange alien glyphs moved across. The walls like smoke, alive with silent meaning. He had expected a cell, maybe chains, but this was something else. Silk sheets, golden robes, and trays of exotic fruit surrounded him like offerings. But none of it felt like comfort. It felt like a trap. Minutes later, the door opened again. Queen Viralia entered alone, her steps sharp, the soft rustle of her ceremonial robes the only sound in the tense air. She walked straight to him, stopping just inches from his chest, her violet eyes burning with fury and shame. "You should be dead," she said. "You were supposed to entertain them. Instead, you humiliated me." Jace didn't flinch. "I didn't ask to fight. I didn't ask to win. You gave me no choice." Her fingers twitched at her sides, like she wanted to slap him, but held back. "By the laws of my ancestors," she said slowly, "we are now bonded by battle. They see you as a worthy male, a consort." Jace looked at her, confused. "That word, does it mean husband?" She gave a short, bitter laugh. "In your tongue?" "Yes, but only by law. You will live here. Eat well. Wear what I tell you. Smile when I say. You will look like a consort, but don't ever believe you are equal to me." She turned sharply, walking toward the tall window, where twin moons rose over the palace gardens. For a moment, her shoulders dropped. She looked tired, alone. He stepped toward her, slower now. "Why keep me at all?" he asked. "If I'm that much trouble, why not find a way around your laws?" She didn't turn to him. "Because if I break the law, the council will remove me. I will lose the throne, and this empire will fall to men far worse than me." Jace could hear the weight in her voice, pride and pain woven tight. "So we play pretend?" he said. "In front of your people, I act like I belong here. And behind these walls, I'm just a burden?" She faced him finally, expression unreadable. "Exactly." That night, he was given a private chamber next to hers, guarded by silent soldiers with glowing spears. As he lay down on the strange but soft bed, Jace stared at the ceiling of stars painted above him. He wasn't free. Not really. But he also wasn't a prisoner in chains. He was something else now, something dangerous to her reputation, and yet necessary to her survival. Across the wall, he could hear faint footsteps, maybe hers, maybe pacing, maybe restless. And he wondered if she was just as unsure of him as he was of her. The next morning, he was dressed in formal Yushari garments and brought to the grand hall, where nobles waited with judgment in their eyes. The queen stood at his side like a statue, her voice cold and steady as she introduced him to the court. "This is Jace Calder," she said. "He won his place beside me not by favor, but by combat." Murmurs spread like fire among the nobles. Some glared. A few smiled, hunters sensing political blood. One of them, a tall male with silver markings across his face, stepped forward. "Tell us, Queen," he said loudly, "can a creature like that survive the politics of a throne room as well as the arena?" Viralia didn't blink. "He won't need to," she replied. "Because I will." But Jace felt the air shift. The court didn't accept him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That night, as he walked to the edge of the moonlit balcony, staring out at the endless black sky, Viralia joined him in silence. She stood close, the soft scent of her perfume mixing with the alien night air. "You still think I'm here to ruin you?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer for a long time. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, "No. I think you might be the only one who can ruin me without ever meaning to." Before he could reply, a loud thud shook the palace gates below. A runner arrived breathless at the queen's side, eyes wide. "Your Majesty," he said, "someone just tried to poison the consort's food." Jace's blood ran cold. Virelia's jaw clenched. And without a word, she turned and began to walk fast and furious into the Lund. Heart of her court, asterisk. The doors to the inner court flew open with a slam that silenced every noble inside. Queen Virelia marched forward like a storm barely held together by skin, her violet robes whirling around her boots, eyes locked on the council table ahead. Jace followed just behind her, still in ceremonial garb, but with new wariness in his step. Someone had tried to kill him, and now the Queen's mask of control was cracking. "Which of you placed poison on my consort's plate?" She growled, her voice sharp enough to slice armor. The nobles exchanged glances, some smug, some frightened, none confessing. One elder rose, his crest of feathers trembling slightly. As he bowed, "My queen, surely this is a misunderstanding. A kitchen error. Perhaps the food wasn't The toxin was grown from krillth root," Virelia snapped. "Illegal in my empire. Engineered to only react to human biology. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message." Her gaze swept across the chamber like a blade, daring anyone to speak. Jace stood still, feeling like a knife stuck between ancient stone. These weren't just nobles, they were predators in silk, smiling through their teeth. One woman, younger, and the rest, with silver tattoos winding down her arms, stepped forward with a slow clap. Maybe the court isn't ready to be ruled by someone who loses battles, and then brings the enemy into her bed. The silence after her words was suffocating. Jace didn't know her name, but the tone told him enough. She was dangerous. Virelia stepped down from the dais, slowly, her hands loose at her sides. "You want to challenge my right to rule?" The woman smiled. "I already have. Officially. The vote begins at dusk." And just like that, the queen turned away and walked out, her silence louder than any declaration. Back in her chambers, she slammed her palm against a scanner, locking the door as it sealed behind them. "They think I'm weak," she said, pacing. "They see you and they smell blood. They want me broken, removed." Jace stood near the window, looking out over the glowing spires of the alien city, the towers twisting like frozen fire. "Then use me," he said suddenly. "Not as a puppet, not as a symbol. Use what I know." She blinked, surprised. "And what do you know?" "I know how humans read people. I know fear when I see it. I know which noble is bluffing, which one's about to move, which one would sell you out for power." "You said they think you brought an enemy into your bed? Maybe it's time we prove them right." That night, a feast was held in the Hall of Ancients, the ceiling made of mirrored glass and the walls glowing with old memories. Virelia and Jace entered together, side by side, not as prisoner and queen, but as something new. She wore her armor, this time golden plating, with sharp blue accents. He wore dark formal cloth stitched with earth metal, gifted by her artisans. They looked strange together. They looked powerful. The nobles watched, and Jace watched them. Back, one by one, he spotted their nervous hands, hidden earpieces, shifting eyes. During a toast, he leaned into Virelia and whispered, "The woman with the tattoos. She's hiding something in her right sleeve." Virelia nodded once. Later, guards pulled her aside. An encrypted injector was found in the lining. But instead of arrest, Virelia invited her closer, poured her a drink, and thanked her for her loyalty. Jace didn't understand until the woman started crying. She hadn't come to kill. She'd come to beg. She was being blackmailed by another noble who had her family hostage. Virelia looked at Jace then, really looked at him, and, for the first time, she smiled, not a forced smile, not a mask, but something real. That night, after the guests were gone and the halls were quiet, they sat on the balcony beneath the twin moons again. Jace asked her what it had been like, growing up in a court like this. She told him about her father's death, about learning to wear armor before learning to trust, about the way everyone bowed, but no one ever came close. "Do you know what the throne teaches?" she said softly. "It teaches that love is weakness, and weakness kills." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Then maybe it's time someone rewrote that lesson. But before she could respond, a red flare lit up the sky, a signal fire from the outer wall. One of the Queen's guard rushed in, panic on her face. "Your Majesty, a fleet just arrived in orbit. It's not ours. It's human." Asterisk. The sky burned red with streaks of plasma as the alien palace shook under the distant thunder of descending ships. The human fleet had arrived, but they weren't here for Jace. Not exactly. They were here because Earth Command had tracked his distress signal, activated when he touched a hidden comm relay days ago. But to the Oshiri nobles watching from the towers, it looked like an invasion. Chaos unfolded like a torn curtain. Alarms blared, guards scrambled, and couriers sprinted through the marble halls. Jace stood at the balcony, staring at the balcony. Swarm of silver Earth ships cutting through the clouds. They were beautiful, sharp like blades designed for speed and intimidation. "They'll think I betrayed you," he muttered. Behind him, Queen Viralia stood still, arms crossed over her armored chest, her face unreadable. "Some already did," she replied. "Now they'll have reason." The chamber doors burst open, and a nervous officer gasped. "High General Rathoon is mobilizing the palace guard. He's claiming this is a declaration of war." Virelia's eyes darkened. "He's going to use this to finally remove me." Jace stepped forward, hands raised. "Let me talk to the fleet. I can explain calm it all down." But she shook her head. "They won't believe words from my palace. They'll need proof you're not my hostage." She walked to him, close now, close enough to smell the subtle burn of the energy core in her armor. "There's only one way to prove it, Jace." Then she did something no one had seen her do before, not her guards, not her court. She removed her crown and placed it in his hands. "Walk out of this palace," she whispered, "alone. If they shoot you, you're not mine. But if they don't, they'll listen." His heart thundered, but he understood. Minutes later, the palace gates groaned open, and Jace stepped into the square alone, no weapons, just the silver crown of the Shari Queen held in his trembling hands. The crowd watched from balconies, holding their breath. Dozens of Yoshari soldiers took aim with plasma spears, but did not fire. The sky shimmered above as a human gunship hovered low, its hull lights scanning his face. Then, a voice boomed through the dust. Jace called her. "Confirm identity." "This is Jace," he shouted, standing tall. "I'm not a prisoner. I'm a consort, and I need to speak to Admiral Rhodes immediately." A long pause followed. Then the gunship lowered its weapons. The hatch opened. A human officer climbed down, looking stunned. But before Jace could speak again, a sharp whine cut through the air, a plasma bolt fired from somewhere behind him. Time slowed. The shot was aimed at Jace's back. He heard a scream, not his own. A blur of violet and gold moved between him and death. Queen Viralia. She had followed him out. The bolt struck her side as she crumpled into his arms, her breathing ragged, blood dark against her skin. The humans raised weapons in panic, but Jace shouted, "No! She's the one who kept me alive." He dropped the crown and held her close, shouting her name, his voice breaking. She looked up at him through pain, her lips trembling. "I was never meant to feel this," she whispered. "Not for you, not for anyone." He held her tighter, eyes wet. "You're going to be okay. Don't close your eyes." Human medics rushed in. Shari guards stood frozen. In that moment, everything changed. The war line between species cracked, not with a treaty, but with a queen bleeding in a human's arms. And Jace knew something deep in his gut. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the moment everything began to truly matter. Asterisk. The queen was still bleeding when the knife came for her throat. Inside the triage chamber, dimly lit by pulsing medical lights, Jace stood at her side while Earth medics worked fast, sealing the wound with biofoam and nanogles. He held her hand. Tight, whispering soft words, useless words, but it was the only thing keeping her eyes open. And then, from behind the curtain, silent as shadow, a Shari noble in ceremonial black stepped forward, dagger in hand, eyes hollow with fanatic rage. The blade came down fast, quiet, certain. But Jace moved faster. He caught the assassin mid-strike, elbowed him hard in the throat, and slammed his head into the wall. The sound echoed like a thunderclap. Guards rushed in too late. Viralia, pale and breathless, looked at Jace like she was seeing him for the first time, not just as a man who saved her in battle, but as someone who had chosen her life over his own, again. "He was one of my own court," she whispered, bitter. "That symbol on his collar, it's Radhun's faction." Her voice cracked. "This isn't politics anymore. It's war." Hours later, the palace darkened under lockdown. Noble houses began to evacuate. Some pledged loyalty. Others vanished. But the damage was done. The High General had made his move. And the people, still confused by the human fleet's presence, were ready to believe anything. "They'll say I gave Earth our throne," Viralia muttered, sitting beside Jace in her war room chamber, bruised but alive. "They'll call it betrayal." Jace looked at her with quiet steel. "Then we show them the truth before they do." Together, they activated the palace's old data core, hidden beneath the throne, a forgotten archive of every royal order, private transmission, and hidden betrayal buried by generations. They worked through the night, and what they uncovered was poison. For decades, Radhun had manipulated supply routes, silenced dissent, even faked alien attacks to gain more power under the guise of defense. The worst part? He had planned to leak Earth's position to hostile empires, just to unite the Yuri through fear. He wanted war with humanity, Viralia said, shaking. "Not because he feared you, but because he feared peace." Jace backed up the files, loaded them into a secure Earth relay. "If we show this to both our people, everything changes." "He'll kill us before we can," she said. "He has control of the military." "Then we don't go through the military," Jace replied. "We go to the people." That night, they moved in silence through ancient tunnels below the palace, emerging in the oldest district of the city, the ancestral plaza, where history had been carved into stone, not spun by propaganda. They hacked into the broadcast tower using a direct link. The screen lit up the sky like a second sunrise. Jace stood before the camera, not as a soldier or prisoner, but as something else entirely. "People of Yushei," he began, voice calm but steady. "My name is Jace Calder. You saw me defeat your champion. You watched your queen claim me. And many of you were told that she surrendered your power to a human. That's a lie. The truth is your queen has saved my life more times than I can count. And I have chosen to stay because I've seen the rot in your system. I've seen the ones who profit from your fear." He stepped aside. Then Viralia appeared beside him, battle-scarred but regal, her hand bandaged and shaking slightly. "I was raised to believe strength meant never needing anyone, but I was wrong," she said. "Strength is knowing when to trust, when to change, when to rise. And I will not let traitors twist our future into fire." The transmission ended. Moments later, explosions rocked the distant eastern towers. Radhun's response. His troops marched on the palace. the sky filled with drop pods and flyers. War had begun, but not the war he expected, because now the people were watching, divided, afraid, but no longer blind. And as the queen stood beside her human consort, blades drawn, defenses ready, her voice was low but steady as she whispered, "We survived this night, or we die rewriting history." Asterisk, the throne room was on fire. Not with flames, but with light-bright, pulsing arcs of energy flaring from. Collapsed generators as the palace defenses crumbled under Rayhoon's assault. Smoke curled through the high ceiling. Shadows danced on cracked marble, and outside, the sky was red with warships, both Ushari and human, circling above the city like vultures. Veralia stood in the heart of the chaos, breathing hard, blood trickling down her temple, crown long gone, her robe torn at the sleeve. But her grip on the ceremonial spear was firm, and her eyes blazed not with fear, but with something older, deeper. Beside her stood Jace, body bruised, one arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage, holding a pulse pistol scavenged from a fallen guard. They'd spent the last 2 hours fighting side by side, defending every hallway, every stairwell, every inch of ground the queen refused to give up. "They're almost through," he said, voice rough. "If they breach the throne doors, then we make them regret it," she answered, and for the first time, her lips curved into something like a smile. The doors shook again, then silence, and then an explosion, sharp and blinding. Through the smoke stepped Rayhoon, flanked by armored soldiers. His voice was calm, cold. "You've lost, Veralia. The people may watch, but they will not follow you through ash." But he was wrong, because just as he raised his weapon, the throne room wall burst open from the side Earth drop pods had arrived. Human Marines poured in, not firing, but standing between Veralia and the traitor. Then came the sound, hundreds of voices outside the palace, not screaming in fear, but chanting her name. The broadcast had worked. Citizens had taken to the streets, demanding Rayhoon step down. And across the city, more Ushari soldiers began laying down arms, confused, unwilling to fight against their own people. Rayhoon aimed at Jace. "This is your poison," he hissed. "You brought this to our kind." But before he could shoot, Veralia moved like lightning, one clean strike with her spear, straight through Rayhoon's chest. He collapsed, eyes wide in disbelief. The traitor fell before his soldiers even knew how to react. The battle was over. Hours later, the fires were out, the bodies carried away. Jace sat in the gardens, exhausted, as medics tended to his shoulder. Veralia walked toward him. No crown, no armor, just herself. She sat beside him in silence, their knees almost touching, the moonlight soft and silver on her skin. "The council offered me full restoration of power," she said, unchallenged. "Rule." He looked at her sideways. "You're not taking it, are you?" She shook her head slowly. "No. I've ruled by tradition. I want to lead by truth." She reached into her robe and placed something in his hand, a small metal sigil, shaped like both the Ushari spiral and Earth's delta. "It's a new crest, for a new house, ours." Jace's throat tightened. "You sure about that?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't want a throne anymore. I want a future, one I choose, with someone who chooses me back." He looked at her, really looked past the power, past the pride, past the war. And all he saw was someone who had bled for him, fought beside him, risked everything for a bond no one else believed in. He took her hand. "Then let's build that future, together." The final scene faded to dawn, two figures walking side by side into a world forever changed. Not queen and consort, not alien and human, just two souls who refused to be enemies and chose love instead. Asterisk, the end.